Hey there, welcome back. In today's video, we want to talk about the Orthodox defense against the Queen's Gambit. Yeah, very soon my chessable course in English will be released and I'm very happy about it, so I wanted to share this emotion with you and, well, tell you some things that you may not know about the Orthodox. And I'm going to do that by analyzing a game played by Garry Kasparov back in 1977. It's a training game against Grandmaster Magerramov. And yeah, okay, so without further ado, let's jump right into the action. d4, d5, c4, the Queen's Gambit, and e6. This is the Orthodox. It intends to continue with knight f6, bishop e7, and short castle. It's a simple way of playing. And, well, after e6, knight c3, putting pressure on d5, knight f6, and knight f3. In this game was played knight f3, bishop g5 is completely normal, and bishop e7, and our plan is to castle as soon as possible. The game continued with knight f3, bishop e7, bishop g5, castle e3, h6, this is pretty normal, bishop h4, and now we have to solve the situation of this bishop, the main problem of the Queen's Gambit decline of the Orthodox defense. How to solve it? How to improve this piece? Well, b6 is the most natural way, and this is the so-called Tartakower variation, the one I recommend in my course. Yeah, the name of the course, by the way, is Dethrone the Queen's Gambit, a beginner's course. And something worth mentioning about the Orthodox is that after d4, d5, c4, e6, the exchange variation leads to an unbalanced position. Not like in the Slav, after c6, the exchange variation leads to a symmetrical position. That of course you can manage to unbalance that, but it's way more difficult than playing for a win on the exchange variation of the Orthodox, as c takes d5, e takes d5 leads to the Cartwheel structure, and this structure is by nature a unbalanced structure. After b6, white has several ways to continue, but the game continues with queen b3. It puts pressure on d5, enables long castle. And the idea is that after bishop b7, they want to trade on d5. Yeah, but they don't trade right away because then we would capture with the knight, trying to keep the diagonal open. So to avoid that, they trade on f6 first, bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, and now, okay, we have the bishop pair, something nice, and now c takes d5, we are forced to capture with a pawn. Yeah, and our bishop is somewhat, well, restricted. But bishops have this kind of nature. They get restricted, they get open. As you'll see, this cannot be considered a bad bishop. And we have, well, a long-lasting asset known as the bishop pair. This is something that will prove useful. Well, now, with the king in the center, we are interested in playing c5. So white continues with rook d1, putting pressure on d5 and trying to discourage our c5. That didn't stop Kasparov from playing c5. Yeah, the thing is that he wants to open the position as the king is still in the center, and there are, okay, a couple of moves to castle, and, well, we are creating a pressure on d4. The game continues with d takes c5. Things are becoming, well, materially nice for white, but they are wasting time, they are not castling. And Kasparov played the fantastic knight d7. Yeah, he wants to bring his knight to c5 from where the queen is going to be attacked, and the knight on c5 will be able to perform certain things that are not so obvious at first sight. So the game continues with c6. Instead, capturing on b6 reveals black's intention. The idea is knight c5, queen c2, and now we would like to open the center, to blast open the center, and to this purpose playing knight e6 supporting d4 is the way to go. b takes a7. Now white has those 3 passed pawns, but with the king staying in the center and all pieces, all black pieces, being able to join the battle. Look at those bishops. No, the bishop is too strong, the other one the same. The rook is ready to come to the hunt. The queen can come to a5. The other rook can join. So I mean, black's pieces are having a fantastic time, and it's no surprise that white's king is under a real danger. Okay, instead of that, after knight d7, knight takes d5 was another move. Knight takes c5, and well, in case of queen c4, rook c8, and well, we are trying to put pressure on the queen. Also, the pawn on b2 is hanging, so we're about to capture it, and black is doing perfectly. The game continued with c6. Well, trying to lure the bishop to c6 so the knight can come and attack it right away. What happened to be a mistake. It was better to play bishop e2 and try to get out of the center as soon as possible. But Kasparov's opponent played knight d4, presuming that Kasparov would try to retain the bishop pair, but he played bishop takes d4. Rook takes d4. Yes, I know capturing with pawn doesn't seem to be really an option, as the king is in the center, but it can be a more solid way to play it. Bishop e2 and castle is coming. Well, queen g5 is a really nice way to continue, putting pressure on e2, threatening rook e8, controlling d2 so the king cannot go to d2. And the game may continue with g3. Now black can take advantage of the undefended rook on h1 and activate the bishop by playing knight c5. Yes, I told you bishops seem bad, inactive, blocked, but unless the situation is completely blocked, there are always chances for bishops to become active. The idea is d takes e5, d4. Yeah, and now the pawn attacks the knight and the bishop attacks the rook. Rook e8 is coming, so white is into a horrible situation. Well, the game continued with rook takes d4. Seems normal. Now he's trying to play against the isolated pawn. Yeah, if we give white a couple of tempi, bishop e2, castle, then perhaps the d pawn could become a weakness. But after knight c5, attacking the queen, queen d1, and knight e6, now attacking the rook, we get a very interesting position after rook d2. Well, white is about to play something like bishop e2, or even bishop b5, trading the defender of the d pawn. And well, once white's king reaches the king side, everything would be okay. Now Kasparov plays the inspiring d4. Yes, he opens the diagonal for the bishop and tries to open the e file against white's king. The game continues with e takes d4, rook e8, and well, white is on a crossroad, but at a very nasty one. How to get rid of these threats? Well, we are trying to perhaps even capture, or knight f4, capturing later on g2. So white played f3, the ugly looking f3, trying to reach f2 with the king. Well, white's options weren't any better. Yes, playing bishop e2, good, simply leave g2 undefended, bishop takes g2, followed by knight f4, and yeah, it's nightmarish for white's king. While playing knight e2, well, it's answered by knight f4, and things are getting pretty nasty. g2 is falling, and of course rook g1 is a horrible move. After queen g5, everything is coming. Yeah, I mean, bishop f3 is threatened. Yes, as for instance a3, bishop f3, g takes, queen takes g1 as the knight is pinned. So yeah, once the the file is open against the king, things become pretty difficult. Perhaps the best would have been d5. Yes, the idea is to force matters a little bit and at least shut the bishop from this diagonal. Now, after knight f4, bishop e2, yeah, the g2 pawn falls, but it seems that after knight takes g2, king f1, and both pieces are threatened. Yeah, and here there's a very nice resource to save the piece with bishop d7, threatening knight f4 or simply bishop h3. And in case of white capturing the knight on g2, queen g5, and things are horrible for white. Forced king f1, bishop h3, king e1, and okay, it seems white is doing more or less well, but queen g2, and in case of rook f1, queen takes f1, checkmate. Well, so after f3, there are several moves. Kasparov came up with a brutal way to continue the attack, a very attractive one. If you want, you can pause the video and try to find your own response to this dilemma, what to do to get the attack going. Kasparov played the shocking bishop takes f3. Yes, he wants to attract the queen to f3 in order to play knight g5 and win the queen. Or in case of g takes f3, then the diagonal is much weaker. Yeah, what I mean is if we check right away, then g3 is possible. Not beautiful, but possible. But once the pawn on g2 disappears, queen h4 is stronger. But yeah, there were some other ideas. For instance, knight f4 looks pretty nice with intention of meeting king f2 with knight h3. Yeah, an amazing resource. Yeah, the idea is to answer g takes h3 with queen h4 and king g1, rook e1, putting pressure on f1 and being able to bring the rook, and things are getting really bad for whites. Queen c2, rook a e8. The attack is super strong. It's hard to say it wins immediately, but I have a sample variation that goes like this: d5, rook takes f1, king takes f1, rook e1, king g2, and bishop d7. Yeah, we allow white to capture as this is mate in 2, rook takes e1, bishop h3, followed by queen takes e1, checkmate. Well, it's time to remind you, if you are finding these ideas useful, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. So a beautiful attack as well, but Kasparov bishop f3 is fantastic. So the game continues with g takes f3, queen h4, rook f2, obviously king e2 is simply answered by knight f4, checkmate, rook f2, and now the rook is pinned and the king is very exposed. There are several ways to continue, but knight takes d4 is the most natural. Bishop e2 is forced, the king cannot move as the rook would be undefended, and knight e2 is answered by knight takes f3, checkmate. So there are several options to checkmate white's king, so the way is very narrow for white's king to survive. Bishop e2, knight takes f3, taking advantage of the two pins, and the bishop is also pinned by the rook. So king f1, queen h3, forcing rook g2, and well, there are several ways to continue. Bringing the rook might be the most natural, but Kasparov preferred to attack the rook. And this is already winning, as the material is not such a big deal. I mean, once the rook falls, black has two pawns and one rook in exchange of two minor pieces. And the thing that the most important characteristic of the position is the exposed nature of white's king. Yeah, the rooks are going to attack it smoothly, bringing rook e6, rook f6, or doubling rooks. But Kasparov tried to win a beautiful game. So he answered rook h g1 with rook a d8, queen e1, and rook d3. The spectacular way to incorporate the rook into the attack to put pressure on e2. Queen f2, yeah, on pinning the bishop, and now knight f3. No problem, I give you the rook, and well, Magerramov didn't take it, he played rook h1. Yeah, he needed to defend h2. Well, because of bishop d3, he simply answered by knight h2, and again, checkmate. Instead, knight d5 to have an idea of the dangers that are around white's king. Rook d1, bishop takes d1. Now the rook is opened and knight takes h2, checkmate. And there are several other ideas. For instance, trying to trade queens, there is simply answered by knight d2, check, and winning the queen. Rook h1 and rook d e3. Yes, putting pressure on e2. Yeah, the e2 bishop is defended by the knight, but this is a way to tie white's forces to the defense. The game continues with rook h d1. It is pretty difficult for white to do anything at all. The queen cannot move. Yeah, look at this queen. If the queen comes to g3, knight d2, and we win the queen. Otherwise, the queen has no squares. The bishop cannot move because of rook e1. The knight is defending the bishop, so moving the knight is simply answered by rook takes e2, winning the game immediately. So white's forces are almost in Suswung. The rook is pinned. The other rook is defending h2. So the only move is rook h g1, and Kasparov was enjoying himself so much that he played king h8. Say, come on, it's your turn. I mean, playing rook takes c3 would have been enough to win. Well, the idea is b takes c3, knight takes h2, now that the rook is on g1, now h2 is not defended, king e1, queen takes c3, king d1, and rook d8. And well, bishop d3 is forced, rook takes d3, and now queen d2 is forced, as otherwise king e2, queen d2 checkmates. Yeah, the knight is covering those squares so the king cannot go anywhere. After queen d2, rook takes d2, rook takes d2, and queen a1, and the game is decided. Yeah, a beautiful example of how he could have won directly by capturing the knight, but he was enjoying himself so much that he played for the Suswang. Yeah, your opponent cannot move, so he's going to be auto-destroyed. The game continued with rook h1, the only possible move, and Kasparov played b5, and Magerramov resigned. Yeah, the pawn is coming to b4. Obviously, this pawn cannot be captured as knight takes b5, rook takes e2. So after b5, a3, a5, and there is no way to stop b4, and well, game over. This is why Magerramov resigned. So all in all, this is was a very beautiful game, but I wanted to show you how the Orthodox is a pretty solid defense, but it gives you the chance to fight for the initiative. But sometimes we're going to play a normal game in which we know the plan. I'm going to tell you when the course is released so you can check it out. Thank you for your attention and see you in the next one. Goodbye.